We are live, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the late afternoon Finance Committee meeting of the Cleveland Heights City Council. I'm the chair. We have Vice Chair Gail Larson.
Here.
We have a few council members in attendance. We have President Kuda. We have Councilmember Cohn. We have Councilmember Cobb. We have Joe Bardinsky, our finance director, Rashawn Caldwell, and Tiffany Ware. And we have Councilmember Joe DeWitt-Foy, who has just stepped into the room. We are going to start with our agenda, which is sort of a department update, the latest financials and audit status.
And on that, as far as the audit, the auditors have our 24 numbers. We're waiting for them to come in. They're going to come in the next couple of weeks because they're going to do work both for 24 and 25. But they have everything that they need right now from us. And we're just waiting for them to come in to see if they have any other additional questions. But they want to kill two birds with one stone by doing 24 and 25.
That's excellent news. So you don't have to wait till the whole 24 is done before you
Correct.
25. Wow. Correct. So there was also issues in the past regarding assets, asset valuation or asset tables.
That's the infrastructure.
Okay.
The update that we have on that is, and this is conceptual in nature, we are not going to know the value of all our roads because it hasn't been being tracked.
Mm-hmm.
So hypothetically, let's say there's 3,000 miles of roads. Through Public Works, we could get accurate detail on 5 miles because those roads were done over the last 5 years. We will put in the detail of the 5 based on the work we did over the last 5 years. The other 2,995, and this is just for example, are going to have to be evaluated as we discuss with an appraiser that we have actually a conference call tomorrow on how we're going to do that. And we're going to do that same concept with the sewers as well as stormwater.
Okay.
So over the next 50 years, it'll be rock solid, accurate, because every year we do a mile of road, we'll peel it off from the unknown portion, put on the known portion. So that number every year will keep getting smaller until that number no longer exists. But it's going to take time.
I understand.
But it will satisfy the auditors.
So we have an existing asset inventory that includes all of the trucks and the equipment that we have. And,
That's not the issue.
okay.
The issue is just the infrastructure.
I get that, but I just wanted to make sure that we still have, that we have in place an asset inventory because I wasn't sure about that.
That is, yep.
That was done through CBIZ 2023. And then for 24, we picked up any assets, any additions on the schedule.
And do you all periodically go through and take, like, when Director Klingscale purchases a piece of equipment and she's retiring a piece of equipment, are you aware of when those?
Additions and deletions.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
You mentioned CBIZ. CBIZ has been one of our
They were the vendor or the consultant that did the appraisal back in 2020.
Not the CBIZ that you're thinking out in Cleveland, because if you Google it,
Oh, okay.
there's the CBIZ in Cleveland.
Okay.
No, they're from out of state. They did the other fixed assets. I tried with another company and they just didn't seem interested to appraise it.
Okay.
And they couldn't do it until later in July or August. So I said, let's start with the people that we've worked with before and they could do it quicker.
So CBIZ is a consolidated bunch of accounting firms that have consolidated over the years.
They're an appraisal firm that does this type of information.
Okay. Just as a point of order, the Councilmember Stone walked in seconds after the red light turned on, and we didn't get to hear her vote. So you are here. So let's continue with the latest financials on the audit.
And I'll turn it over to Tiffany.
All right, if we can turn to page 4 of the financial statements. So looking at our cash balance as of January 1st, we began with about $92 million. Our revenue for quarter one is about $30 million, and our expenditures are approximately $25 million, with a cash balance of $96 million. Our open encumbrances are $22 million, which leaves us an unencumbered fund balance of about $73 million. Just looking at where we ended March 31st, 23, 24, and 25, we still have some ARPA funding. So 22, if we look at 26 compared to 22, we're pretty much in line with where we were before ARPA funding. Just our revenue, some of the variances in revenue, for instance, if we turn to page 5, looking at our revenue variances, our intergovernment contract variance, it increased by about $839,000. This is primarily due to the CDBG program, and that's about $665,000. And our property taxes increased by about $605,000. Charges for services increased by $349,000. This was primarily due to CDBG2, which is offsetting expenses. Our state levy taxes are variance increased about $301,000. And this is, we mentioned last month, this is due to the adult cannabis tax revenue that we received. Next, our all other revenue increased by about $240,000. This is from the Special Improvement District and the Planning Department, Cedar Fairmont, Cedar Lee, as well as Coventry. And just to note some of the larger unfavorable variances, looking at municipal income taxes, that increased by $316,000. This is primarily due to the city income tax with Rita, and our interest earnings decreased by $488,000. This is due to federal rate cuts as well as decrease in ARPA-related funds. Any questions on the revenue before I move to expenditures?
You mentioned
Sure.
there was an increase in the state levy share taxes primarily from the cannabis dispensaries. Were there any other notable changes to from the state in terms of what they are sharing through that program?
Through
The adult
cannabis.
No, just overall. So
Well,
that's local government.
Local government funds are up slightly, but
Okay.
we hit the material one for what the jump was.
It was some real
But nothing
smaller
significant.
variances that
Okay.
spread across multiple departments, but nothing really noteworthy.
Thank you.
Can you remind me what the budget was for 2026?
Oh goodness, what was that?
It was a little over 100, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
In
it wasn't
total,
that much?
on the expenditure side, yes.
So how do we on January 1st only have 91 million? I don't understand how that happened. I'm looking at page 4.
Well, that's basically the ending fund balance. So really, all that's saying is, had we brought in zero revenue, brought in zero revenue in 26, we would not have been able to execute the whole budget because we only had 91 sitting in the bank.
Yeah.
But that 111 are expenditures, but we're also bringing in significant revenue that offsets that.
111 was just the expenses that we're expecting to expend by the end of this year, it wasn't the revenue.
Okay.
Chair Posh,
Yes.
this brings up an issue which I'm hoping that you will provide the budget figures in comparison to where we are, especially since this is quarterly. This is done, if we could do it quarterly, I'd really appreciate it, because we should not have to ask that question. We should have that in front of us for both revenue and expenditure.
Right. But it's not necessarily that much of, I mean, we can do it as 112, 212, but that's not how revenue comes in, nor is it how expenditures are gonna go out. So don't rely on that 100%.
No, I don't, and I don't expect it monthly, I just think.
No, but even quarterly,
Yeah.
you wouldn't see that.
I don't wanna wait till year end though,
Oh,
Director,
I don't
wanna
disagree.
wait till year end.
We will provide it, but you can't necessarily rely 100% because a good example would be in the Parks Department. All the summer programs,
It's timing.
they're gonna look good as of the first 3 months because we haven't hit any of those expenditures.
True.
I remember we had this conversation last time and we talked about a mid-year, after all
Yes.
of your taxes are
Yeah.
in, you'll have a much better
Yes.
place to assess it, but I take your point as well.
I think not necessarily on a per line item, but it would be helpful, I think, as sort of like a bottom line item. So it's like, okay, well, what was our total revenue for budgeted revenue? Total, not individual
What are
breakdowns.
these various categories? We could do that.
Yeah, I mean, just something.
Yeah.
And even if it's not on the same sheet, I mean, if it's just a side table that we can have just a comparison, just so you don't have to upset your reporting requirements.
Or make the numbers even smaller to fit it out.
That's
No,
okay for
Not when you have 65-year-old eyes.
Right.
Moving on to expenditures, our expenditures, some of the variances that are noteworthy, capital decreased by about 1.9 million. This was due to the ARPA funded projects. Personal services, this increased by 362,000. And this is driven by labor-related expenditures. Public Works had an increase of about 374,000. This was due to the local 860 pay increase. Fire Department had a $152,000 increase. This was due to added staff. And lastly, 97,000 in the Community Relations Department. This was due to added staff as well. Any questions on expenditures before I move to the general fund? Sure.
The numbers that you just gave, like per department, per staff, were you reading off something else or is that in here?
Yeah, my notes.
Okay, so I
Mhm.
guess my question on the staffing was, were those FTEs that were added in the budget for this year or are those filling open?
So those FTEs were added in the budget, but comparing to last year.
Okay,
So this is not comparing the budget. Let me just clarify that. This is comparing to prior year.
okay.
And are those comparisons equal? Because if I recall, there was some payment that was made outside of last year and was put in this year. It's like I forget which one it was. It was the,
Workers'
Workers'
comp.
comp.
could have been it.
Normally it's paid at the end of a year.
Mhm.
And it got paid in January of 25. It also got paid in December of 25.
So that's actually
So-
bringing our variance down.
Okay,
Right, because that's definitely a time difference.
right, okay.
Alright, so moving on to I'm gonna go ahead and skip to page 7. And looking at our general fund, so our revenue, it was a decrease of $573,000 compared to prior year. Again, some of the same comments, interest earnings decreased by $489,000. Municipal income taxes decreased by $316,000. However, this was offset by the cannabis tax of $225,000.
That's a one-time.
The cannabis,
No,
We'll
it
get on
was
a periodic basis.
we're gonna get it annually. It was accumulated. It was the first one we got. So it was bigger, the first one, and now it'll go smaller, but it should be annual.
What's your annual estimate? Sorry.
That's what I'm
No,
over.
yeah,
That question.
You have an idea of what that
Trending
would.
like 10 to 12,000 a month,
Yeah,
so probably like,
120.
120-ish.
And that's from 2 dispensaries or 1? What?
Just one.
Just 1.
all right, looking at our expenditures For the general fund, our expenditures had an increase of about 1.4 million. Other than personal services increased by 939,000. This is primarily due to the $750,000 grant and loan payout for Park Synagogue in the planning department, as well as our liability insurance increased to 164,000. Personal services, the same labor-related expenditures that were in all funds are also for the general fund. And our capital increased by 156,000. This is primarily due to laptops in the IT department, as well as about $52,000 of replacement mobile data terminals for the police cruisers. Sure.
I have a tech question. Do we have like a policy on when computers are replaced, when phones are replaced for staff in the city?
We are in the process of working on that.
Yeah.
To come up with that.
Well,
And I've had meetings already with IT. Every department should know the age, et cetera, of their computers, so we could start budgeting. Hypothetically, we replace 1 or 2 computers a year, so we're not getting them all old computers. I'm working on it.
okay. Yeah, because I just, I think that's probably a best practice, that everybody
Sure.
we know every 3 years or every 4 years your laptop gets.
Right, and it's a similar concept to like police vehicles.
Yeah.
You don't replace them all the same year. If you X amount, you do 3 a year, that number stays pretty consistent.
But there'll probably also have to be a catch-up. I mean, if you don't want somebody with an 8-year-old laptop having to wait for the next year, so there might need
granted.
to be, yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen any, at least in finance,
Okay.
that are that age. But nobody's still working on floppy disk in finance. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I agree, citywide, we need to get that.
All right, that concludes my presentation on the financials.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for getting these to us today. The next item is sort of an add-on. We had a short meeting, I believe, last month, and we were gonna talk about a policy for funding requests. And I believe at our retreat, we pretty much realized those funding requests would go directly now through to the mayor's office and the administration.
We're
Is that-
somewhere in the administration, I think that would make more sense. I might push for community relations. I think that could make sense. Community relations and or so community relations and Parks and Rec has a special events coordinator, but they coordinate with community relations as well. So my thought is it should live in one of those 2 departments. Since they're already doing a lot of the work with those outside groups when they're requesting other services or help.
So it seems like we have the city administrator here. So Michael Reese, it probably falls underneath your discretion and the mayor's discretion on if someone comes to us and wants $4,000 for a race or whatever it might be as a sponsor, those requests were coming through to council. We're thinking that really should be an administrative item.
Then you just even further background, in years past, groups have come to council requested anywhere from, I don't know, 2,500 to 7,500 or even more for co-sponsoring of events. Council had been taking those on a case-by-case basis and funding them usually prior to this year hadn't been budgeted. So it was finding funds for that. This past, in the 26th budget, $20,000 was added to a council discretionary fund for that purpose. The requests are still coming to council, but in years forward, we think it would make more sense if council allocates a budget to the administration and then when working through special events coordination requests, that the administration would be able to handle those co-sponsorship requests.
Sure. And when you say council member do it for that council allocates a budget, you mean during the during the budget process?
Correct. But this was the first year that had happened. So that's a step forward. And then I think in the 27 budget, we would want to allocate some money for that purpose, but then have the requests and the processing of that live in the administration somewhere.
Right. Does it make sense for, yeah, I think I agree with what's being proposed here, and I've thought a little bit about it as I understand some of the history. The administration proposes an amount for this, and then council reviews it during the budget process and decides to increase, decrease, or agree with what we set aside.
I think that's fair, just as any other budget allocation, conversation between the two, but yeah, I can start with a proposal from the administration.
Yeah, so I had, we still have that draft,
Right.
which I'm looking at right now, which last meeting I went back and I switched it to have council approve all the funding. Now I'll go back and go back to the first thing, which was that it goes to the administration, but just as like a practical next step, should we, once I do that, what should we do to memorialize
We have a couple in front of us, so we have to.
Well, this would be
do
for
that.
2027.
Well, let me interject something. First, I think we have to let the administration decide if they want to do this. I don't mean if they even want to have something on the website that even refers to this. That may not be the case. I think that is step one. And then whether or not obviously if council still thought it was a good idea, I guess we could allocate some money anyway. But and let's not forget that for every one of these events that are probably going to take place anyway, there's all these ancillary costs, police, security, and so forth. So, I'd like to hear that the mayor thinks this is a good idea before we even say, well, this is how we would do it.
I think that's one of the strongest arguments for bringing it into the administration, because there's the special events coordinator and community relations and police and fire are already involved in so many ways, and we should look at that as a comprehensive contribution to these events. If the city is allocating overtime police force to support these events, we should think of that as part of our contribution. And it's kind of difficult for us to be issuing a sponsorship amount when all of those requests are going directly through the administration. So to me, it makes more sense if it's more of a one-stop shop.
This is a relatively small pool of money. It's like $20,000, right? And we have at least 2 grantees who get the same grant every year, right? Future Heights and the Heights Music Hub. I mean, there could be a hybrid approach where we just say, we're always going to fund these until future notice. These organizations have historically been funded. They're a budget line, and then there's a small discretionary fund for other things. That gives it even more credence for administration to take over.
I mean, I'm not opposed to that, but I think the benefit, and I agree with Councilman DeWitt Foy, like the benefit of having us budget a pool, a small pool or whatever we deem necessary, and then handing it over to the administration does 2 things. And also having some, I don't think it needs to be on the website, but what I think we're developing here are guidelines for the administration to go by when considering the request for council's budget. And what that does is does 2 things. It creates transparency and clarity around the fact that the city is not a grant maker, open and all to all nonprofit funding requests, which I think has been a burden for us in the past. And 2, gives us gives the administration some flexibility, to your point, President Kuda, around the broader expenses that are associated with the event and how they might want to position the city's support across the council budget, the police, et cetera. So I do think there is value to maybe not putting it up on the website, but at least agreeing amongst ourselves on a document that we hand over to the administration with how we would like our budget allocated, that line item allocated. That's how I view it.
So I think we need to also realize there's really 2 different types of requests that we get. We get sort of like the easy ones, which is like sponsoring a race or something along those lines. And then there's the six-figure request that we get to make a wholesale change in something or make a very impactful gift. And I think for this latter item, if I recall correctly, we decided as a committee that until we get our bond rating, we really can't entertain any such ideas. But there's gonna be a time when someone's gonna come to us and they have a wonderful idea in their head and they're gonna try to get us to fund something.
In terms of public services, would it be appropriate to direct those requests to the CDBG process? That's what a lot of those, more traditional grants towards nonprofits or community development
Yeah,
organizations.
and that's what I was gonna say, is that we have a third prong of funding, which is the annual CDBG funds that go through the Citizens Advisory Committee. Some nonprofits receive very significant funding for economic development and housing purposes, which is the core of that program, and other nonprofits for basic services. And that what that does is puts it in a citizen committee that make those recommendations along with the administration that, staffs that process, and it comes to us, for approval. But I personally would like to see the city residents move away from considering the city as as a grant maker or an open checkbook for these big projects, because again, I've said this before, like if we have hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe we should be putting it towards a snowplow and not, so I think that clarity is important, and to continue to hammer home that message.
Everybody's okay with this?
Yep.
So just to sort of recap a little bit, there's gonna be some conversation that's gonna happen with the administration, and maybe it makes sense for me to meet with, unless you have enough information and you can carry it through.
I think it requires a little further conversation.
Okay.
With the mayor and I, and perhaps the finance director, but we can do that. Are you suggesting we do that with you, Councilmember Bosch?
I don't think it's necessary. We have a follow-up, you and I have a follow-up meeting regarding a public safety issue that's gonna be happening in the next week and a half, I believe. Why don't we just try to wick this in at that point, just to make sure if there's anything you need from us or the committee, we can take care of it then.
Absolutely. And to the earlier points made by Councilmember Foy and Councilmember Cohen, is I spoke in front of the Citizens Advisory Committee. That's what it's called, right? Citizens Advisory Committee last week, and shared with them some of the priorities within the administration and how those kind of line up with the different categories that they look at when they're recommending funding to the city council. So I imagine that's going to be kind of an annual process now that we're working more closely with that group. So
good.
Do you want me to update this again and send it to you? So the guidelines that we put together.
Yeah, I think that closes the loop on that, and then we could, why don't you also CC the mayor and Mr. Reese about that?
And then, just to clarify, we are, this is for 27, and we're gonna continue with our current process for requests and allocations for the current year. We have 2 requests ahead of or in front of us. Coventry has requested consideration, and we're sort of working through those with the existing process. So we can finish that for this year and then switch to this process moving forward.
So, okay, so the runs are easy. The Coventry, I think, is a little bit more sort of out of scope from what we're sort of accustomed to dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
How do we want to deal with that particular item? Any thoughts?
I was uncomfortable with the fact that they have not approached any other foundation after losing the Cuyahoga Arts and Culture grant. I asked if they had considered other other funders, and they said, well, we lost our grant. There's a number of foundations, and it doesn't have to be the Cleveland Foundation, but there are plenty of nonprofit funders here, and I really do think we need to be a funder of last resort or no resort. And so I would, if we want to do something small, but I think coming to us to save their events budget is not the position I'd like the city to be in.
Well, I think there needs to be some due diligence and thought on this. Who, he was on your agenda? Do you know?
You talk about Matt Moore?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I mean, you know, I was asked to put it on the agenda. I did. I mean, we listened. I mean, my feeling is that we gave significant ARP funds to Coventry. And I know this is a little bit apples and oranges, but not that much. And I don't think it's sustainable. So I don't look at that as something we should be doing, but I'm one person.
It was also for the addition of a new festival that was coming up within a month.
yeah, it's,
So
I'm saying, you know, money we're putting into Coventry Garage, that was $500,000. And I think there's going to be a budget adjustment to that because of the elevator. And then the $300,000 in ARPA funds, help me, somebody. It was close.
From ARPA for their,
3 and change.
Pardon?
3 and change.
3 and change, yeah.
Maybe 3 1/4.
and this also opens up the door of equality amongst other neighborhoods as well.
You know,
And-
some people came to the door at the time and some people didn't. I mean, you know, that's not really what, you know, we're really not in that business about who comes calling, but
That ship has sailed though too.
yeah, that ship has. But everybody had a shot at it, you know.
I'm just wondering if we need to get back with them in a
Oh, I
formal
think that's the fair
capacity.
thing to do. But you know, that needs to be a consensus on council as far as what we want to do.
I would just say that we have in years past traditionally funded at least their winter event, the Winter Fest and the Parade of Lights, or the Lantern
Festival, yeah.
So
We did it once. Yeah, but
just in 1 year.
it was 1 year. Am I right?
Do we know how much that was?
I think you are right.
7,500,
Pardon me?
Just been once.
7,500.
Yeah.
$7,500.
Did they ask for that this year?
It was, I believe the request was 10 for their events budget for a number of events throughout the year. And some of those would likely not move forward without that contribution. Some of them, they have more of a budget for.
I mean, Robin Van Leer has moved to East Cleveland because she couldn't get a place here, but she did find a place to do it. And I'm sure she's going to want to continue doing the Lantern Fest. I mean, I don't have a problem that we could have that discussion. I don't know if that's now.
Probably not.
we don't have a proposal. Well, I guess we don't, yeah.
I mean, I guess it was in that omnibus package he was talking
Yeah,
about.
it was a request for $10,000 for events throughout the year. We could look back with him.
Did he specifically mention what is it called, the Lantern?
I don't know if he did.
I did not see that on the list that we had
Yeah.
in front of us last time we talked, so.
Okay.
I'd like to see the list, just to get a better sense. If someone could share that.
Yeah, I can
that would be great.
look back with him and then have him put a request in writing for specifically which events we're talking about, and then we can have
I'm sorry, as part of that, I didn't mean to cut you off by raising my hand, but as part of that request, can you ask if they have approached any other grant makers or foundations for funding for any of these events? And if so, let us know where.
Okay, we're gonna move on, if that's okay. The partial review of each fund balance. And you shared a number of them with us last meeting. I think we went up to 200 last time, was that right?
I think it's 205.
205.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody has any questions on any of the other funds. I mean, obviously, we're gonna be looking at several of them to see if we could eliminate. What possible.
Is anything jumping out at you that you're serious about?
This was
asking
from
to have
last,
removed? That's on the ones we haven't
last-
discussed yet.
last meeting.
It was not emailed.
It was not even.
If we can email it, so we can always have it for.
So there was this document here that we got last
Right.
time that went up to like 210 to something to 223.
You didn't receive all funds?
But this is all that we had last, unless there's something that you brought.
So you went through 223, we could go through those and we'll provide you electronically all the rest of the funds.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the issue is just trying to get a sense of where some of these things, I mean, what some of them are being used for, okay? I'm trying to find one in particular that I've always had questions about. Well, I mean, just talk about the hospitalization. So there's one, we have a hospitalization number, but if I remember right, it doesn't include everything, all the hospitalization.
What
It just-
fund are you looking at?
I'm looking at 701, and I'm just starting to pick
Oh,
and choose. It would be more helpful to
well,
kind of
some
go
are
through it.
passed through, yeah, no, we'll give you from 224 on. And we could go through that next time, but we'll give it to you in advance pretty quickly.
I think that sounds great, and if you can actually start with 101 and then just give us a complete packet as opposed to just the differential, this way we'll have new members that are coming up to speed can get the whole packet. And then why don't we, as a homework assignment, kind of go through that in time for our next meeting and just be prepared to ask questions next time.
That'll work, and just to answer Gail your question. Yeah, we have a fund 214, local TV programming. That's nothing but more than a cable franchise fees. I've never seen it anywhere but in the general fund. It does not make sense to have its own separate fund for franchise cable fees.
And it's pretty close to same expenditure, revenue expenditure.
Right. But yeah, I mean, that runs through a general fund.
So that would be where the auditor or whoever you have to submit to for approval, they should be happy with that, right?
Right.
Shouldn't be a problem.
Oh yeah, I mean, nothing that we would look to do wouldn't be allowed. I mean, there might be certain steps to get there. Like now that
Bless you. Thank you.
a fund's been created, having to submit something to the Court of Common Pleas, but
Yeah.
they're not gonna disapprove it.
When you review, you do go back historically to look at the entries that have made in that account to see, even if it's been active, if there's been any
I'm
activity.
gonna go back as far as I can, sure.
Yeah,
There's also one, like police administration fund, and I can't find it here for the life of me right now. No, this was a number where I believe a bunch of the ARPA revenue replacement money was put into, and I had questions about it. This was within the prior administration, never got answers. I'll find that. And we can talk about that next month.
That will work.
Moving on to the next item, a discussion about the city's debt service.
excuse me.
So this came up, I believe, in a prior meeting, and just trying to get a better understanding of really where we can see where if either we've given loans out, where we are, if we're actually paying on notes, it would be helpful to see. And we sort of talked about it, and when you and I had sort of a pre-call prior to this meeting, we discussed that we didn't have to have necessarily answers today, but everybody's looking at the sheet of paper, maybe this is what, I guess this is something that you're gonna present to us.
That's the sheet.
Okay,
No, and I mean, it answers, I mean, first of all, we're paying on all of this every year until it's paid off. And it's basically broken down into 3 items. You got your bonds up top. In the middle, you have the OPWC or OWDA loans. Those are 0% loans. They're borrowing money, so why not take advantage of it when you can? You're never gonna pay interest on it, it's 100% principal. And the bottom piece are leases where at the end of the lease, we own the equipment. So it's leased owned. And that's mainly the fire trucks. Minus the bottom one, the Leopardo Sustainability Project. Second column shows you the last date of payment for those across the board. The amount we budgeted, what we started off with principal at the beginning of 26 or the end of 25. Principal that will be paid in 26 and what the outstanding principal will be at the end of 26.
Councilwoman.
Yeah, I mean, I have shared this with the mayor, but I would really like to understand the Leopardo contract better because this is a huge, one, it was a project entered into by the last administration, but it's going to sit on our books. It's the largest piece of debt service that we have, and supposedly should be getting energy savings as a benefit. And so I would like to know where we are on the agreement, and then also if we're actually going to be making any financial benefit from it. So I don't know if that's, since it's sustainability, I don't know if that's the Municipal Services Committee, or we do it with finance, or I don't know where we.
I think it should really be sitting in the finance department right now because it seems to me some of the issues that we've heard are finance related at this point, finance and contract. I can bring this up to them, but
You know, this was sold to us a couple of years ago as obviously something good for the environment, but it was supposed to be neutral, revenue neutral and everything. So I mean, I just want to clarify when you say benefit, I mean, it was supposed to balance out. That's the benefit, that we would actually save as much money as we spent. So.
I see that we've paid in 26 on the Leopardo, $310,661.
We will pay.
Will have paid. And we budgeted $1,770,000. Are we making periodic payments on the principal, or how is that being?
Well, for the most part, most of this debt, you have biannual interest payments on most of the debt. And you pay principal once, usually in December.
Okay.
So the $1.7 million includes both.
Okay.
But the principal we will be paying down is only $310,000.
Okay.
Plus, when this was entered into, it was entered into in 24.
Right.
Interest for 25 was deferred. That's why the interest is substantially higher in 26 because it includes the deferred interest from 25. And then it's going to get more level going forward.
And what's the interest rate?
Did we negotiate 5? Was it 5%?
Well, there was a cap put in there, but I don't know that that's the interest rate.
We could send out an email.
Yeah, I mean, we had a little back and forth on that, and
Mid fours.
they wanted to cap it a little higher than,
Yeah, I
than
think
we wanted
it's
to go.
mid fours. And
Okay.
this was probably the same across the board. But a lot of times when you issue bonds, the interest rate will change from year to year. It could be a range of anywhere, say from 3 to 5, depending on when you do the bonds.
Yeah.
But this, I think, is pretty consistent interest. Oh, we'll get you a number.
I think I'd like to talk to the mayor and the administration on, there was some concern regarding this specific contract all the details of that concern I'm not aware of. But it seems to me that there was gonna be a point, I was assuming there'd be one point this would be brought back to council with an update. And I think this is probably something that should be a council conversation as opposed to a finance committee conversation. But I will track that down.
And the other question that I have related to debt service for the finance department is, for the director, like now that you're on board with all your good experience and background, like is there any old debt that we should be, I mean, probably the old debt is at less interest rates than the newer debt, but is there anything we should be doing differently, or is there any restructuring or
Refinancing?
Refinancing, exactly.
Well, obviously the middle section.
Right,
That's at zero, so I'm not gonna change.
Right, don't do that.
The top section, I mean, a lot of times it'll depend on what the bond agreement was when the bonds were issued. There are only certain dates where they're callable. I doubt, given as far as we're in over 10 years, we're gonna have that much flexibility to call. And depending on the type of debt it is, and right here, it doesn't look like we have any of that, but if we ever had special assessment debt, it's almost a nightmare to call because you're gonna have to chase all the individual parcels to try to pay people off. Did they sell their parcel? Is there somebody new? So a lot of times that doesn't make sense. But in talking with bond counsel, in our normal meetings, I haven't had those yet here, but I've had the meetings on whether it makes sense to call something. But you have to see a big enough spread, because as you redo it, there's costs to issue new debt, and you wanna make sure you're offsetting the new costs with more savings going forward.
And I'm not suggesting that we should be doing that, but I'm just, with you here with new eyes and fresh eyes towards our financial situation, I would appreciate your perspective on that.
Do we have any elected bonds that were passed, voted on?
No.
That I thought we had
The community
bonds,
center
the
one
community
finished
center that finished off, and
a couple of years ago.
it's interesting that we didn't borrow against that.
This is all unvoted on the bonds.
So just confirming, there's no voted.
Correct.
Okay. The one that looks like happened in 2020, the various that has essentially a $9.2 million principal. So it's in your bucket one, the last item.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us any color on that? On what that was for?
I will be able to.
Okay, that'd be great. Any other item? Any other items for this? So now that we're all together, it was brought to our attention now multiple times. It might make sense for us to increase our sewer rates to help pay for some of the consent decree items. And it was, I'm looking back at Councilmember Cobb, because I believe it was mentioned that this was, someone was working on this in the administration. Is it finance? Can we get at some point in time, not necessarily now, get an update?
We are in the process of embarking on that study.
Okay. And how long does something like that take?
We're gonna have to meet with a group to analyze it, and then we could give you a better idea when.
Okay.
But I mean, in our world, sure, we'd like to know that answer today.
Okay.
But we're gonna see how long it's gonna take, and then we'll definitely report back to council.
Okay, that would be great. The other item is an item that you and I spoke about, and it's replacing and updating the accounting system software, which we know is an incredibly heavy lift for a department. And we were told that we really needed, prior to many people in this room, and when I first got on council, we were having a very difficult time getting financial reports. Not so much now, thank you. And you know, we were told essentially, we need to replace the software because it's not any good anymore. Now, we know we've got an older package. We know there's gonna be some time, but a couple of us from last year were under the impression that this is something that would be an active process. This was before you were brought on. I think you've had a change of position on that. I'd like you
Well,
to share that with
active as-
everybody.
In your mind, it was gonna be active in 26?
Well, 26,
I mean, it was
27.
budgeted in 26. That would be something we'd be looking at 27 going forward. On that. We wanna make sure everything else is in place. Because to your point, it's a big lift, not only for finance, the whole entire city.
Right.
I mean, everybody's gotta learn everything new. A number of accounts are gonna get reduced and combined, funds are gonna get reduced and combined. And then when you actually review various systems, pick a system, when we're gonna run for 3 or 4 months straight using 2 separate systems before you go live. So it's at least a 2-year process when you start.
Just a question, is this something you think we should do now that you're here and you've seen what you have? Or do you think it's a nice to have?
I've kicked all 4 tires of the New World system. I haven't necessarily opened the engine or the hood yet. But I know there's an engine in there. But I just haven't gone that far down the road.
Does it include a report writing engine that's better than New World that you can think of?
Well, new systems probably would be.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'm seeing from some of this system, it's not necessarily the New World product. It's the way the system was set up to begin with
Okay,
that make it a nightmare.
okay,
And that's something you're never gonna unwind.
Unless you move to someplace else.
Right. But I mean, within New World, you'll never unwind that because that's just the way the system was set up.
It seems to me that you and your department need to understand, look under the hood of what we got going with New World and take a pause if necessary. But when it's the right time, come back to us and say, it's the right time to explore this.
Right.
So that's what seems to me like the best practice.
Yep.
And we know the wool was being pulled over our eyes multiple times in the past.
And the good news is it wasn't me.
I don't think any of the guilty parties are here anymore. So,
Right now, I think the director's cleaning out the garage.
right.
You know,
Right.
He's
I mean,
he's
Before
not
he can see
actually
the
getting in the
tires.
car yet.
I mean,
It's metaphorical.
we had-
Kinda like got that 1-800 junk, they're on their way.
We're gonna give you a big leaf blower to.
I wanna.
Electric.
Oh, that's right. Please say it's electric.
With a silencer on it.
I don't wanna disparage some of the people before you. They were good people doing what they were told to do. I think they were caught in a dragnet of dysfunctional administration. So we'll just leave it at that. I have an other item. Does anybody have any other kind of business?
I have another, Director, can you let us know, do you have an estimate of what, I know you were asked if you knew how much we get from the state each year, were you prepared to say how much state funding the city gets?
Local government?
Yeah.
2.2 million.
2.2.
That's what we have budgeted for 26.
Yeah, we might need that for another meeting.
Yes.
So thank you.
I do have another.
Yes.
Since you're not here for the May meeting, do you want to take responsibility for the agenda? Do you need me to work on it with you? How do you want to proceed with that?
Let's work on it together
Okay,
and let's determine, we're sort of shifting up how we're gonna be doing these meetings starting next month. So let's have a conversation about that.
Okay.
Determine, I think the meeting certainly should proceed. I don't need to be here, but I might be able to get online.
We can talk about that actually tomorrow at our special meeting at home.
That'd be great. Well, if there's no other business, adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.